Hello, everybody. The API space is evolving rapidly, and one of the things that we see is ideas to show it in a little bit more understandable form. And one of the persons who have done a lot of work in this space is Mark Boyd of Platformable. Hey, Mark, thanks
Hey
for
there.
joining.
It's great to be here with you, Eric.
Yeah, we met recently at API Days Paris, and you had just kind of revealed the new version of the API landscape, a giant poster there. And I found that really interesting to see how this is evolving over the years. If people are wondering what the API landscape really is and why they should be interested, what are the typical users that you see of the API landscape?
Sure. So, because it is such a broad-ranging industry now that's really matured over the years, then we see there's two main audiences. So, there's those that are using APIs or building APIs in their own businesses and organizations, and they want to see what tooling is available that will help them do that to achieve the best practices in the industry. And then the second audience is the actual tool providers themselves who want to get their tools in front of API users.
Yeah, and that's how I started knowing the API landscape, first seeing it, and it showed much smaller than now, but it already showed like an impressive array of tools that were available in the API space. Can you briefly walk us through the history of the API landscape and how you got involved and how you helped improving it?
Sure, it's an initiative from the API Days conference series where they wanted to map and show all of the community that was engaging with their conferences around the world. So they developed a API landscape, which was really just a diagram, a bit like you see from CB Insights or all of the or Crunchbase or whoever, where it's like a map of all of the different players in a particular space. So they had a sort of static version of that in 2017, and I think it was listing like 200 to 300 API tools providers at the time.
Yeah, it was already pretty nice to look at. I remember that when I saw it for the first time.
They did a really great job. Like, it was really engaging you immediately. Like, oh, what could I possibly use out of this? So it was fun, and it did its work back then. Yeah. So then in 2020, they API Days came to us and they wanted something a bit more interactive. It was getting to the point where there are enough tools now that just having a look at the logos on a static diagram was just too hard for people to be able to make use of in a meaningful way. So they asked if it was possible for us to help them build a solution that would be a tool in itself, where you could then go in and look at each tool or each subcategory of tools and see what's out there and find out more about each individual tool provider. So working with them, we then mapped out all of their categories that they had, and then we made an interactive version so you can look at a category like developer portals, see who's in the developer portal space, click on the developer portal, then drill down into that specific tool and see what the links are, where they're located, what they offer. Come back out, look at the next developer portal, and so on.
Yeah, and I remember doing that, and that was already a big step up. I think was the ability basically you don't have to Google all the names, right? You can just kind of stay within the tool. So that was one improvement that I think you published in 2020.
That's right. So that came out then. The challenge for us then, though, was that it was already getting pretty complex as far as the how the APIs were categorized and subcategorized, because the industry had changed quite a lot since 2017. We built it up to about 1,000 tools, but it was starting to get messy as far as do we put this over here or do we put it under this category and so on. So last year, we were able to work with API Days to reinvent the API industry taxonomy. So we looked overall going from infrastructure or from regulations even to infrastructure, building APIs, deploying APIs, publishing them, and then consuming external APIs as well, and how that flows. And then we sort of group that into a taxonomy with sort of underlining elements. So things like API knowledge experts. So, for example, this YouTube channel is now listed as one of the
Really?
resources that's available. uh,
Thank you.
So there you go. But yeah, so we looked at that, and we looked at some, and then there's some industry associations and other things that sort of didn't, a media that didn't have a place in the previous tool landscape as well. So now we're mapping all of those.
And what I saw, what I saw most immediately when I saw the first version that you published in December in Paris was that now you kind of have a categories and subcategories, right? It's more structured now than it was before.
We had to come up with a third level. So it's now clusters. So it's sort of like back end. And then in that, there might be databases or cloud providers or whatever. It allowed us to have a sort of three levels of categories. So we've got stuff like API lifecycle, and then within API lifecycle, we've got API design. And then within API design, there's like design tools, linters, and so on.
Yeah, so I'm sure it will be challenging and interesting to keep up with the dynamics of the API space, right? It seems like every year somebody invents almost like a new category of things you could possibly do. Thanks a lot for this run through. Is there anything you would like to leave our listeners with in terms of, why they should come, or what's particularly exciting for somebody who maybe hasn't checked out the website so far?
Sure. I think for an API tools provider, if you're working in that space, there's two ways that you can make sure your API tool is listed. So first of all, you can send a feature request or add your API and fill in the form and have it included. If your API is already listed, you can go in and request additions. So help us. It is a bit of a crowdsourced tool as well. So if you see fields that aren't filled in for your tool, then please get in touch and help us populate those fields so it represents your tool as best as possible. For the users, I think it's really about just using this for any procurement, any sort of tool decision-making process. Come back and have a look and see what's around. Luckily, it's hosted by API Days and it's connected to their API Scene website, so you can actually look at the tools and then go to API Scene and see some of the articles about latest best practices and so on. So it sort of matches with the tools and the best practices and the resources available to support you.
Okay. Yeah. So that's, I think, an interesting twist, right? That now it's also kind of connected to a publishing site where you can get stories concerning the landscape, and then the landscape can link back to the publishing site. And
Yeah.
I will definitely check out how this channel is listed there and see whether I can maybe get some updates in. Thanks so much, Mark, for taking the time. I think it's really interesting. I look forward to seeing that existing over the next couple of years, probably also evolving over the next couple of years. But I think for now, we have a really good resource. So thanks a lot, Mark.
Okay, thanks everyone for being here. Cheers.
Thanks, everybody, for watching. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up, consider subscribing. And until next time, keep getting APIs to work. Bye, everybody.